There is a ridge in the Piney Woods of East Texas where the pine straw stays dry for most of the year, where the nearest slough is a good half-mile downhill through a wall of yaupon and sweet gum, and where for the last several seasons wildlife officers in Angelina County have been logging something that should not be happening. Cottonmouths, not near the creek, not in the bottomland where every field guide says they belong. On the ridge itself, sunning on dry needles, tucked under fallen bark, a long crawl from any standing water at all. A cottonmouth away from water is not supposed to be a common sighting. The whole identity of the species, the reason it earned the name water moccasin in the first place, is that it does not wander far from wetlands. It hunts fish and frogs in sloughs and ditches, and the slow backwaters of the Neches and the Angelina River systems, ambushing from the shallows, or patrolling the flooded timber after a rise. Rarely more than a short crawl from somewhere it could slip underwater if it needed to disappear. Rangers in Nacogdoches and San Augustine counties will tell you, and have told each other for years, that if you are nowhere near water, you are not supposed to be worried about a cottonmouth. It was one of the few reliable comforts in a region that has plenty of other reasons to watch where you step. That rule held for generations, passed down the way this kind of knowledge always is. From a grandfather clearing a fence line to a father teaching a kid where it was safe to walk without looking twice. It is the rule that is now quietly failing, and nobody agreed on when it stopped being true. The reports did not arrive as an event. There was no single flood, no single storm, no clean before and after that a biologist could point to and say, this is when it started. Instead, it built the way these things build in East Texas, one landowner at a time, one game camera at a time, until enough people in enough counties were describing the same thing that it stopped sounding like a string of coincidences and started sounding like a pattern nobody had named yet. A man clearing a fence line in Polk County finds one coiled under a stack of cedar posts nowhere near the pond. A hunter in Tyler County watches one cross an open cutover a full quarter-mile from the nearest branch. A homeowner outside Livingston finds one in a woodpile behind a house that has never, in 20 years, had a snake problem of any kind. None of these people were wrong about what they saw. That is the part that unsettled the herpetologists once the accounts started reaching them. This is not a misidentification problem in the way it usually is with cottonmouths, where every dark-colored water snake gets the blame and every defensive gape gets called a cottonmouth threat display, whether the animal is venomous or not. These were confirmed, photographed in several cases, close enough to see the vertical pupil, the heat-sensing pit, the blocky head that separates a pit viper from anything else moving through the leaf litter. A couple of the Polk County reports were even brought in for a look by a district biologist who has spent enough years telling landowners they were looking at a harmless banded water snake that his first instinct, by his own account, was to expect the same thing here too. It was not the same thing. The animal was correctly identified every time it was checked. It was simply somewhere it had no business being. That distinction matters more than it sounds like it should, because it closes off the easiest explanation before the investigation even properly starts. If this were a story about panicked landowners mistaking a common, harmless water snake for something venomous every time it turned up somewhere unexpected, the story would end there, with a lesson about field identification and nothing more. It does not end there. The animal on the dry ridge in Angelina County was a cottonmouth. The animal in the woodpile outside Livingston was a cottonmouth. Whatever is happening, it is happening to the actual species, not to the public's understanding of it. So the question stopped being what species this was and became something harder to answer. Why is an animal defined by its attachment to water, leaving the water behind? The first explanation offered, and for a while the one that satisfied almost everyone who heard it, was drought. East Texas has not been spared the dry years that have reshaped so much of the state, and a slough that used to hold water through August now cracks and goes to mud by June. A cottonmouth that has spent its whole life keyed to the presence of water is not going to sit patiently in a dry ditch waiting for rain. It is going to move overland if it has to, searching for the nearest wet ground, and if that search takes it up onto a dry ridge or across a cut-over pine plantation, so be it. Under this reading, the ridge sightings are not a new pattern at all. They are simply the old pattern of a thirsty animal doing what thirsty animals do, made visible because there are more people out on more land to see it happen. That explanation held for almost a full season, and it is easy to see why. It fits everything people already believe about how animals behave under stress, and it asks nothing of anyone's understanding of the species beyond what was already true: a dry year, a desperate animal, a longer crawl than usual, simple, testable, and comfortable in a way that field biology rarely gets to be. Then the biologists actually mapped the sightings against the drought data, county by county, year by year, and the clean story came apart. If drought were driving this, the sightings should cluster in the driest years and thin out in the wet ones. They do not. Some of the most persistent upland reports came out of years with normal or even above normal rainfall for the Piney Woods. Landowners in Sabine County were finding cottonmouths on dry ground in a year when the creeks were running full, when every slough and borrow ditch in the county had more water sitting in it than the animal could possibly need to satisfy the drought explanation. Whatever was pulling these animals away from water, it was not simply the absence of water. That should have been troubling enough on its own. It was not the only complication. If you are watching this and you have your own account of a cottonmouth somewhere, it should not have been. Drop the county and the year in the comments. The map on this one is still being filled in by people who were actually standing there, not by anyone working off a database in an office 3 states away. With drought ruled out as the whole answer, 2 other explanations moved in to take its place, and neither one has managed to push the other out. The first points at what has changed on the land itself rather than in the sky. East Texas timber country has been logged, replanted, and logged again on a rolling cycle for decades, and every clear cut creates a temporary flush of exactly the kind of prey a cottonmouth is built to exploit. Rodent populations spike in the open, sun-warmed ground of a fresh cutover. Amphibians move into the ephemeral pools that collect in logging ruts and skid trails after a rain, pools that hold water just long enough to draw frogs in and just long enough to draw something that eats frogs in behind them. Under this account, the ridge is not a mistake, and it is not desperation. It is a hunting ground the timber industry built without meaning to, restocked on a schedule the snakes have learned to read better than the landowners have. The people who favor this reading point to timing more than anything else. A handful of the better documented cases share a pattern that is hard to write off as coincidence: a stretch of land harvested a season or 2 before the first cottonmouth turned up somewhere nobody expected one. The ephemeral pools left behind by heavy equipment do not look like much to a person walking past on a Sunday. To a frog, and to whatever is hunting the frog, a rutted skid trail holding rainwater can read as close enough to a permanent slough to be worth the trip, at least for as long as the water sits there. Under this account, the animal has not truly left the water behind at all. It has simply learned to recognize a kind of water nobody had bothered to count. The second explanation is quieter and, to the biologists who take it seriously, more uncomfortable. It suggests that the animal itself may be changing, not the land around it. Cottonmouths are not a uniform population moving in lockstep across the Piney Woods. They are thousands of individual animals, and individual behavior varies the same way it does in any wide-ranging species. If a subset of that population has, for whatever reason, begun tolerating longer overland movement and drier resting sites than their ancestors did, and if that subset is surviving and breeding at rates equal to or better than the wetland-bound majority, then what looks like a strange season of unusual sightings could be the leading edge of an actual shift in the species' baseline behavior across an entire region, not an anomaly passing through, a direction the population is quietly settling into. What makes this second theory hard to dismiss is that it does not need a triggering event at all. Drought needs a drought. The clear-cut theory needs a recent harvest nearby. A behavioral shift only needs time and enough generations for a slightly bolder, slightly drier tolerant lineage to outcompete the more cautious one, and East Texas has had plenty of both. Nobody can point to the moment it started because there may not have been a moment. There may only have been a slow accumulation of individual animals willing to cross ground their grandparents would have avoided until enough of them were doing it that people finally noticed. Nobody working this problem can tell you with certainty which of these is doing the heavier lifting, or whether both are true at once and simply reinforcing each other, a habitat pattern feeding a behavioral one until the two are impossible to separate. The clear-cut theory explains the local clustering around recently harvested tracts. The behavioral shift theory explains why the pattern has persisted across years in counties that do not share a single logging calendar and never experience the same cut on the same schedule. Both survive contact with the data that exists so far. Neither survives contact with the other cleanly enough to be declared the answer, and every biologist willing to speak on the record about it says roughly the same thing, that settling it properly would take a study wider and longer than anything currently funded for a species most people were never worried about to begin with. What is not in dispute is the outcome on the ground. People across the eastern edge of this state who grew up with a simple, reliable rule, stay near water and you are unlikely to meet a cottonmouth, are now finding that rule does not hold the way it used to. The animal has not become more dangerous. Its bite chemistry has not changed. Its temperament has not changed. And it is still, by every account that matters, a snake that would rather be left alone than have to defend itself. What has changed is where a person's guard is allowed to drop. A rule that worked for 100 years, stay away from the water, and you are almost certainly fine, is a rule that shapes behavior without anyone thinking about it, the way people walk a dry ridge without a second glance, or stack firewood against a shed wall without checking underneath first. It has become less predictable, which for the people sharing this land with it amounts to almost the same thing as more dangerous, even though the two are not the same at all. The wildlife officers logging these reports are careful not to overstate what they have. They are not calling this a population explosion. They are not telling people the Piney Woods has become more hazardous overall, and they are quick to point out that the total number of confirmed upland sightings, even added up across every county reporting them, remains small next to the number of cottonmouths going about their ordinary business in the sloughs and bottomlands where the species has always lived. What they are willing to say, on the record and off it, is that the pattern is real, that it does not fit the old rule, and that the old rule is the thing most people in this part of the state are still relying on without realizing it has started to crack. There is a version of this story that wants a villain, a single cause you can point to and blame, drought or logging or something worse, and East Texas has not been given that version. What it has instead is a slow, uneven redrawing of where an old and familiar danger is allowed to be encountered, spreading not through any single dramatic event, but through 100 small ones, a fence post here, a woodpile there, a cutover somewhere in between, each one on its own explainable, all of them together still refusing to add up to a story anyone can finish. Every landowner who has found one on dry ground has their own theory by now, shaped by whatever happened on their own property, and none of them are foolish for believing it. The clear cut behind the house makes the prey theory feel obvious. The dry creek 2 summers ago makes the drought theory feel obvious. Neither one is wrong exactly. Neither one is the whole answer either. The ridge stays dry. The snake keeps showing up on it anyway, season after season, in numbers too small to alarm anyone officially and too consistent to keep dismissing as chance. And until someone brings back a study wide enough to settle the argument properly, tracking individual animals across seasons instead of counting isolated reports after the fact, the only honest thing left to say is that the water moccasin, an animal that earned its name by staying close to water for longer than anyone alive has been watching it, may be quietly becoming something other than what its name still claims it is. If this is the kind of investigation you want more of, the channel keeps digging into the patterns nobody has fully explained yet. Subscribe and stay close, because the next one might be happening on ground you thought you already knew.